I'm a firm believer that Africa can only be developed by Africans. So it's a false belief if we think that someone else will come and develop Africa. There is no free lunch.
Experts believe that the economic emancipation of Africa, which will bring about an end to heavy reliance on imported goods, can only be made possible by intra-African trade.
Anybody coming here will come with conditions. Although they come as friends, they pose as friends, and they act as friends. The real action, they are not friends. They are business people. They are, if we have to go to the extreme, they are exploiters in a different way. Yeah, I don't want to use other words, that are used by politicians, but that is the issue, and therefore I think that if Africans can help one another to develop their countries, that is the best for us. Because we don't need to exploit each other as Africans, we only need to help each other. And Africa is endowed with a lot of resources, human and natural. But our resources are not utilized to the benefit of Africa. They are taken out of the ground or above the ground, and then they are processed somewhere else, and they come back as processed goods. But for how long?
But whose fault is that?
Our fault. It is our fault. No finger pointing, but it is our fault, Africa's fault. Why should we? What do we lack? We have the brains. We have trained people, and we understand what we want. But we fail to implement what we have, decided not to do. And sometimes I'm not well understood. You think that I'm speaking big science, but very simple science when I say there is no point of telling the people that you want to achieve ABCD. There is no point of promising the people that the country is going to be AYB at a certain level in certain years, because all those promises are not accompanied by own ideology, indigenous ideology. It's the ideology of saying, I would like to see my country 2030 reaching this level. When you do that, you then have to internalize this thing and say, how do I achieve that? There are these steps that I need to follow. And I only need to give some examples. Cuba. Cuba has been living since 1957 under blockage. The USA. Indigenous ideology. What do I want my people to be under these circumstances? And then you go around the policies around these things, and you put them there. Today, Cuba survived, and America is talking. And America is buying from Cuba. Yeah, I remember very well when the relationship was done, that the whole plane carrying the mayor or the former mayor of New York to Cuba to go and buy what? Medicine. They emptied everything. So, but before, we're not talking. Another indigenous ideology issue that I can refer to is China. Yeah, people were talking about communism, people were talking about this and that. As far as I know, and I did study in the environment, there has been no communist country in the world. There is no communist country in the world. There are communist parties, and there are economies that were closer to communism. That economy was the Soviet Union, but it never reached communism. But China, even now, they said it after their Congress, that it is This type of with the flavor of China. Today, China is number 2 economy in the world. That's how indigenize your ideology and make sure that what you are planning for your people, you achieve it when you have got all the goals and targets directed to this kind of thing. But wildly, if we just make promises, I'm afraid it will not. So that is not rocket science. It's a simple thing that we Africans, we have to Africanize our own development ideology and see to it that what our people need, they get it.
From the stables of the publishers Echoes Africa magazine comes your favorite TV show, Echoes from the Valley. African story like you've never seen it. Recorded in locations across Africa and diaspora. It is Africa from African perspective.
That conversation about who's the most African, we're really spending a lot of time on something that really is not that significant. What's significant is what we do.
As governments, as individuals, we have got to tell our stories.
What is your African story? What is your origin and the history? What makes your culture and tradition unique? What are your milestones? Echoes from the Valley on Africa Independent Television, AIT. For sponsorship, participation, and advert details, please call the numbers on your screen. Echoes from the Valley, telling the African story.
I must say, throughout my stay in Nigeria, I'm satisfied, extremely satisfied that our relationship, our diplomatic relationship, are at the highest level. Although we did not have a lot of VIP visits between the two countries, but yes, 2014 we had the former President Goodluck Jonathan visiting Namibia, albeit for a short period, and then we had the former President Pohamba visiting Nigeria to attend the amalgamation of Nigeria, the 100th anniversary of the amalgamation of Nigeria, 2014. And we also had President Gainkop visiting Nigeria 2 times. Although all these visits were not state visits, they were very important. They took place during my stay in office there. And therefore, I think they contributed very much in elevating also the relationship between the two. Although we are saying Nigeria is not a stranger to the history of Namibia. Nigeria has immensely contributed to the liberation of this country. Nigeria declared itself and joined, albeit the distance, the frontline states, which helped to liberate Namibia. So material support, financial support, and moral support was rendered to the people of Namibia, led by SWAPO. And a lot of young Namibians, led by SWAPO, or under the umbrella of SWAPO, were trained in Nigeria from the 60s. The first group consists of the current Speaker of our National Assembly, Dr. Kachavivi, and the others. And I think, if I'm well informed, is that their group was only, and their stay in Nigeria was only disrupted by the outbreak of the Civil War. So otherwise they could have stayed and finished. Now the second group is that of 1975. That includes me. That group was to arrive in Nigeria in July, but we all know what happened in 1975 July. There was a removal of the military head of state, and then we had to go back to the bush. But after a few months, 3 months or so, from July, I think it was September, then that leadership under General Multara Mohammed, may his soul rest in peace, and his deputy, General Obasanjo, they then said, no, the children must come. So that's how we managed now to revive the trip to go to Nigeria, and we finished our secondary school there. Why going to Nigeria to do our secondary school? It was not just about the armed liberation struggle. we could have liberated Namibia, all of us. We could have died, all of us. Then who was going to rule the country? So therefore, the leadership of SWAPO then thought it wise that while some were fighting, engaging the apartheid soldiers with arms, others should go and prepare themselves to take over the administration of the country after liberation. And this is how some of us who happen to have basic secondary background education were sent now to Nigeria and other West African countries, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, up to Senegal, Cameroon, Ghana, to do secondary school. And some of those who completed their secondary school happened to continue at the tertiary level as well. But I myself, the first group that finished 1978, I went to continue my tertiary education in Germany. And that's where I did my studies, and I also then did my doctorate there, only to come back to a free Namibia.
Echoes from the Valley on Africa Independent Television, AIT. For sponsorship, participation, and advert details, please call the numbers on your screen. Echoes from the Valley, telling the African story.
I must say, before I went to Nigeria, I was thinking, this must be a diplomat by accident, because I'm a practical person. We did a little bit of theorizing in school and at work as civil servants, but now going to Nigeria as a diplomat, you have to behave like a diplomat and you have to work like a diplomat. And the first challenge was Nigeria was too much at heart. And therefore there was a little bit of biasness. That I was going to Nigeria, was I going to represent Namibia in Nigeria, or I was going to be on the side of Nigeria, because that is my second country as well. I grew up there, I got trained there in secondary school. But yes, I took up the challenge, and looking at the background of the relationship between the two countries, and looking at the trade, activities between the two countries, I then thought, well, I take off from where my predecessors left off, and I must improve, and I must intensify the relationship, take it to the highest level, and also make sure that the intra-Africa trade is reaching the higher levels as well. The first year basically was acclimatization, knowing about the country's economic situation. The tides have changed, the situation has changed. I was in Nigeria from 1975 to 1978, and now you are coming back to the country, although I visited it in between from 2006 to 2012, or in 2013, July. But now, here I am as a diplomat. You need to act responsibly and decisively and according to the market and the economic situation. But I must say, I found a very dedicated team in Namibian mission, and I also found, interested people from the side of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria and all other institutions of Nigeria, which I got, acquainted with and got involved with.
The economic emancipation of Africa is almost impossible to achieve without the involvement of all Africans, from the leaders to the lab.
The trade volume was not that high in terms of, values. I think most of the figures that were recorded were the figures of the departing diplomats, the value of their personal, belongings, then few things. But there was salt, which was imported, into Nigeria from Namibia. Unfortunately, that salt was not sold, or was not imported as a Namibian product. It was rebranded in another country, and then entered, the Nigerian market as another country's product. But we knew because the origin of the salt was from Namibia. We also had fish, fresh fish, which is called horse mackerel. The size of our fish is different from the size of the fish that I saw on the market, the one that comes from Norway. The silver belly, but very oily, whereas the Namibian one, a little bit blackish, and the size is big, it's 25 plus. And that is the one that was liked by the Nigerian population. And there was another product that doesn't come to my mind now, but the whole issue was why rebranding Namibian products to be sold in Nigeria when we have got diplomatic representations in both countries. The time that I started, 2014, July to be exact, Nigeria also started importing corned beef, packaged corned beef, into Nigeria. Today, if you go to the ShopRite stores, you will find Kettleman, it's a corned beef, in Nigeria. So it is still there, and I think the validity is 2020 for this product.
And that's a Namibian product?
Namibian product from Meatco here. It has got a NAFDAC number as well, and this because this has been a problem of Namibian products to get NAFDAC number, especially when it comes to food items. That has been a problem, and what we try to do now is to invite NAFDAC to Namibia so that they can visit the factories of origin and determine the cleanness, the strictness of the manufacturing of these goods, and to take samples as well to Nigeria so that they can start certifying. Why? Because most of our factories here are up and coming, business people, and therefore it is very, very difficult for them to take samples to Nigeria for testing. They will not afford the payment. So therefore, for my side, I thought it wise, and I got sponsorship to enable us to move around the NAFDAC delegation in Namibia to the various factories, the wine factory, the meat factory, the fish factory, and many others. So that we got a response now later, which was just put together in a joint commission of cooperation, which does not go outside Windhoek when the Joint Commission of Cooperation meets. They only stay in Windhoek. So it was a little bit off when putting the NAFDAC delegation together with the delegation, the government delegation that comes to attend the Joint Commission of Cooperation. So now I left. Who is going to sponsor if the NAFDAC delegation comes? So some people are saying it's not doable. It is doable because I'm privy to the information that NAFDAC also visited some other countries when they were invited and sponsored to go and look at this thing, because for us it's important. And for me, as I said, there's a little bit of biasness.
What is your African story? Echoes from the Valley on Africa Independent Television, AIT. For sponsorship, participation, and advert details, please call the numbers on your screen. Echoes from the Valley, telling the African story. It is a well-known fact that there is barely any value addition to the raw materials that are bound in the continent.
I would like Namibia to trade with Nigeria. Why? We have got farm produce in Namibia, but we hardly add value to this farm produce. Whereas Nigeria has got an advantage over Namibia. I take an example of cassava. We produce cassava also in Namibia, although not in large quantities. But we consume cassava as like Irish potato, vegetable. So we don't add value to the cassava. But Nigeria adds value to the cassava. So you have got gari, the yellow one and the white one. And the one that we drink. Students, we're used to this kind of thing. The other item or agriculture product is yam. So we have got bush yam in Namibia, not known by many people, except the nomadic cattle headers. They know it is in the bush out there. And myself, when I was in the bush in Zambia, and there was a little bit of shortage of food, I knew about it. I went to the bush, dug it up, and put it under the coal, the glowing coal, and I ate it. So it's not it's not known by many people, but it's a useful thing that I thought if we can get this bush yam, which has been in the ground for millions and millions of years, with the cultivated yam that is available in Nigeria, and then we see, how things will move from there. Nigeria adds value, to the yam. Now you have got pounded yam flour, not just the fresh pounded yam, but you also have got pounded yam flour, poundo, and Nigeria adds value to so many things. This is where I thought, when it comes to food, leave alone other industrial things, but our people need to eat. Our people don't eat machines. The machine, they produce food. And therefore what we produce, we should help each other in adding value.
From the stables of the publishers Echoes Africa magazine comes your favorite TV show, Echoes from the Valley. African story like you've never seen it. Recorded in locations across Africa and diaspora. It is Africa from African perspective.
That conversation about who's the most African, we're really spending a lot of time on something that really is not that significant. What's significant is what we do.
As governments, as individuals, we have got to tell our stories.
What is your African story? What is your origin and the history? What makes your culture and tradition unique? What are your milestones? Echoes from the Valley on Africa Independent Television, AIT. For sponsorship, participation, and advert details, please call the numbers on your screen. Echoes from the Valley, telling the African story. Every year, people all over the world take vacations and travel to various parts of the globe and explore new places.
Why should we go to Europe and the other parts of the world when we are living things in Africa here? Yeah, the very nice tourist sceneries, they are here in Africa. You go to Calabar area, or I say now Calabar is a capital city of a state. But you go to Bauchi and Benue, you also find very attractive things. Or you go to other states like Ogun and Osun, you find a lot of attractive tourist sceneries there. Yeah, go to Imo and Anambra or Enugu, you find a lot of, healing, lakes and water sources and all sorts of things. Come to Namibia, sand dunes, sunboarding, sun skiing, and where first in the world the desert meets the ocean. So, what is Africa lacking in order to attract tourists? The Europeans are coming to Africa, but Africans are going to somewhere else instead of patronizing, their fellow African countries.
Echoes from the Valley. African story like you've never seen it. Recorded in locations across Africa and diaspora. It is Africa from African perspective.
As governments, as individuals, we have got to tell our stories.
Echoes from the Valley, telling the African story.
Agriculture is an area that we can work together excellently. Tourism is another, and of course industrialization, depending on what we would like to do, but adding value to the products that we are producing ourselves in our countries. So I'm not talking about assembling cars and other things. Those are not ours, because we don't have an African engine of any vehicle. It's Africans that produce engines in somewhere else. But no engine is produced in Africa at the moment that we can say we have got an African car or whatever. Everything is assembled in Africa. So I'm not talking about that one, but I'm talking about our own indigenous products that we can add value to. And yes, we have got a lot of diseases in Africa. Yeah, we have got Ebola that broke out, and the developing countries were denying Africa vaccine. But I've been saying sarcastically, if Ebola was discovered between Uganda and DRC, how did our indigenous people survive in the forests? There must be a cure in that forest. But did we look for it? We did not. So if there was no cure in that forest where those people are living, they could have been wiped out. There could have been no pygmies in the DRC, but they survived. There could have been no monkeys or gorillas in the forest, but they are there. Now you go back to West Africa, there is ewedu, there is bitter kola. These are the things that we can harness and produce our own vaccine. And we are talking about Zimbabwe, which is producing tobacco in Africa, although tobacco is now regarded as another thing. But you can actually produce Ebola vaccine out of tobacco. So do we wait for someone else to do it? While the tobacco is produced by Zimbabwe in SADC region, while ewedu and bitter kola is in Nigeria, while the University of Ibadan has got a laboratory which can be harnessed to produce vaccine, while South Africa has got excellent laboratories that can be harnessed to produce this vaccine. We need to work together, please. And we don't need a lot of money for that.